Before we begin today's video, remember one thing. The secrets contained within this ancient book are completely ignored by mainstream historians who dismiss it as pure fantasy. And here is the most astonishing part. This forbidden text isn't just a story about giants. It is their own recorded history, detailing their plan to escape the apocalypse and the cosmic secrets they learned from their fallen fathers. What I'm going to reveal by the end of this video has left scholars shocked, because if it is true, then our entire understanding of early human history is wrong. So make sure you watch this video until the very end. Let's begin. To understand their story, we must first return to the world of their birth. An Earth not as we know it, but a younger, wilder planet. A primordial age, veiled in the mists of deep time, where the boundaries between the sacred and the profane, the heavens and the earth, were dangerously thin. Ancient traditions from every corner of the globe whisper of this era. They speak of a time before a great cataclysm, a world teeming with wonders and terrors that have long since been erased from our maps and our memories. Have you ever stopped to ask why cultures that never met, separated by vast oceans and millennia, all tell stories of colossal beings? The Titans of Greece who warred with the gods, the Jatan of Norse legend, frost giants born of chaos, the Deus of Hindu lore, powerful beings who challenged the divine order. These are not mere fairy tales. They are the fragmented cultural memories of a single, terrifying truth, an echo of an event so profound it scarred the human psyche forever. The clearest echo of this time is found preserved in one of the world's most influential texts. Genesis, chapter 6, verses 1 through 4, describe a world where celestial beings, the sons of God, descended and took human wives. It is a chillingly brief account, a passage that has haunted theologians and scholars for centuries. It reads, "The sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose." The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown, Nephilim. The name itself is a mystery, often translated as the Fallen Ones. They were a hybrid race, a fusion of divine essence and mortal flesh. Imagine the sight, beings of immense stature and power, walking among early humans. They were revered as demigods, celebrated as heroes of old. To a fragile, fledgling humanity, they must have seemed like saviors, protectors, possessors of impossible strength and forbidden knowledge. Humanity, in its awe, embraced them. But the divine order saw it differently. It was an act of cosmic trespass, a profound corruption of the natural order, a rebellion that did not take place in some distant heaven, but right here, on the soil of our own planet. The very ground began to cry out. The heroism of the Nephilim was a shadow that concealed a dark and voracious nature. Their presence unleashed an age of unprecedented violence, lawlessness, and spiritual decay. The earth, once a sanctuary, became a stage for their titanic ambitions and appetites. This was not merely a fall from grace. It was an infection, a plague of hubris and power that threatened to consume all of creation. A divine judgment was no longer just a possibility. It was a necessity. What was it like to be one of them? A being caught between two worlds, knowing your very existence had doomed the planet. For centuries, their voice was silent, until a lost manuscript, penned by the giants themselves, was rediscovered in the desert caves of Qumran. To understand the giants, we must first look to their fathers. Their story is not found in Genesis alone, but is laid bare in a text so controversial it was struck from most holy canons, deemed too strange, too dangerous for the faithful. This is the Book of Enoch, a text once lost to the Western world for over 1,000 years, rediscovered in Ethiopia in the 18th century. It is revered as scripture by some, dismissed as fantasy by others, but it holds the original, unabridged account of a rebellion that would scar creation itself. This ancient book tells of a time when the boundary between heaven and earth was dangerously thin. It speaks of a specific class of celestial beings, the Grigori, known in scripture as the Watchers. Their sacred duty was to observe humanity, to guide from afar, but never to interfere. Yet, from their cosmic vantage point, they gazed upon the daughters of men and were consumed by a desire they were never meant to feel. The ancient text describes their longing, and it came to pass when the children of men had multiplied that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of the heaven, saw and lusted after them. Their leader, a powerful watcher named Shemyeza, felt the pull of this forbidden desire more than any other. He saw the hesitation in his brethren and feared he would bear the sole guilt for this great sin. So he gathered them, 200 in all, upon the summit of Mount Hermon. The name of this mountain is telling. In Hebrew, Hermon is related to the word for oath and curse. It was here they made their infernal pact. Shemyeza declared, "I fear you will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin." But they all answered him and said, "Let us all swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations, not to abandon this plan but to do this thing." They swore. 200 celestial beings, bound by a shared curse, descended from the heavens. This was not merely an act of lust, it was an act of cosmic treason. They abandoned their sacred posts and took human wives, an act that violated the fundamental order of creation. But their sin did not end there. They began to teach humanity the guarded secrets of heaven knowledge, for which mankind was not yet ready. They taught the arts of war, how to forge swords and shields. They revealed the secrets of sorcery, enchantments, and astrology. They unveiled the forbidden knowledge of cosmetics and adornment, which the Book of Enoch says led to promiscuity and wickedness. The very fabric of the world began to unravel. The divine order was thrown into chaos. Violence, injustice, and depravity spread like a plague. The earth itself, stained with blood and corrupted by forbidden lore, began to cry out in agony. The ancient text says that the archangels Michael, Uriel, Raphael, Atan, Gabriel looked down from the gates of heaven and saw the great tide of blood and lawlessness covering the world. They heard the tormented souls of men rising up, their pleas reaching the heavens. The earth has been laid waste and is filled with the unrighteous. The divine response was stirring. The cries had been heard. The rebellion of the Watchers had set in motion a chain of events that could not be stopped. But the most immediate and terrifying consequence of their sin was just beginning to walk the earth. The offspring of this unholy union, part divine, part mortal, were born. They were the Nephilim, the giants, and as these colossal children grew, an insatiable, world-devouring hunger grew with them. A hunger that would soon turn upon their own human creators. They did not descend empty-handed. With them came a torrent of celestial secrets, a flood of divine knowledge never meant for mortal minds. This was the forbidden fruit, offered freely, and humanity partook without a second thought. The angel Azazel, the texts claim, was the first to tear open the veil. He taught men to forge swords, to craft knives, shields, and breastplates, the art of war. Suddenly, the earth, which had known only primitive tools, was filled with the glimmer of polished steel and the shadow of the sharpened blade. But his dark instruction didn't end with warfare. He showed women the secrets of vanity, how to make bracelets and ornaments, how to use antimony to beautify the eyelids, and how to stain the skin with precious dyes. The pursuit of beauty became a source of deception, jealousy, and conflict. The glint in a polished mirror became the glint of a drawn sword. Their leader, Semieza, brought a more subtle corruption. He taught the hidden arts of the earth itself, the cutting of roots, eyes, the binding of enchantments, and the whispering of incantations. Was this the dawn of medicine, a way to heal the sick? Or was it the genesis of sorcery, a means to control the spirits and bend reality to one's will? The line between the two blurred into non-existence. This knowledge granted humanity a power it was never meant to wield, the ability to manipulate the very fabric of nature, severing their connection to it in the process. Imagine a world suddenly gifted with technology and power far beyond its ethical and spiritual maturity. This celestial enlightenment did not elevate humanity. It poisoned it. The gifts of the Watchers became the very instruments of mankind's downfall. Knowledge of the stars, meant for navigating the cosmos, was twisted into astrology to divine selfish futures. Metallurgy, a tool for building, became a machine for killing. The secrets of the earth, once held sacred, were now exploited for power and greed. Trust between neighbors dissolved. Vanity replaced virtue. Violence became the common language. The divine knowledge, intended for eternal beings, acted as a spiritual corrosive on the mortal soul. It was a systematic enslavement, not with chains of iron, but with chains of desire, ambition, and forbidden wisdom. The celestial fire they were given was used not to light the way, but to burn their world to the ground. And then, the ultimate transgression took physical form. From the unholy union of the celestial watchers and mortal women, a new race was born. They were not divine, and they were not human. The ancient texts call them the Nephilim. The Book of Giants knows them by their true name, the Giants. These were not merely men of great stature. They were beings of impossible size, their hunger as vast as their forms. The giants consumed all the acquisitions of men, and when men could no longer sustain them, they turned upon them and began to devour mankind itself. They were the living, breathing embodiment of their father's sin, a monstrous legacy of celestial lust and cosmic imbalance, unleashed upon a world that was utterly unprepared for them. The earth now groaned under the weight of its new, ravenous masters, but their birth was only the beginning of the horror. What happens when the children of heaven become the devourers of earth? They were a walking apocalypse. Their true name, the Anakim, meant long-necked, a description that barely hinted at their impossible scale. Ancient texts describe them as titans whose heads brushed the clouds, whose strides could cross valleys in a single step. To stand before one was to know utter insignificance, to have your world blotted out by a shadow of flesh and bone. Their voices were not like the voices of men, but the grinding of mountains, a sound that shook the very ground and broke the will of armies. This colossal size was fueled by a terrifying, unquenchable hunger. The ancient texts describe an appetite so vast that all the toil of men could not sustain them. At first, they devoured the bounty of the wild, the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, the fish from the great rivers. But it was not enough. Soon, they turned to humanity's labor. They consumed the grain from the silos, the fruit from the orchards, and the cattle from the pens, until the fields were barren and the corrals were empty. Men and women toiled from dawn until dusk, not for their own families, but to feed the gaping mouths of their overlords. And when all the works of man had been exhausted, their dark gaze fell upon man himself. The reign of terror began. They taught humanity the art of war, not for conquest, but for the slaughterhouse. The giants subjugated the fledgling civilizations, establishing themselves as tyrannical god-kings. They were worshipped out of fear and obeyed out of desperation. Entire cultures were twisted into a sacrificial machine, designed for the sole purpose of feeding the giants' endless gluttony and sating their lust for violence. How could humanity survive, let alone fight back, against beings who saw them as little more than cattle? The psychological toll was absolute. Hope withered. The spirit of man was crushed under a weight of perpetual servitude and the daily horror of being prey in their own world. This dark age left a scar on the human psyche, a memory that would echo for millennia. Consider the colossal, megalithic structures found across the globe. Baalbek, Stonehenge. Are these simply feats of ancient engineering, or are they the architectural ghosts of a time when giants walked the earth? Perhaps these persistent global myths of titans and ogres are not mere fairy tales, but a deeply ingrained cultural trauma, the faint, terrified whisper of a history we have long tried to forget. Their gluttony was a sin against the earth. Their violence was a sin against heaven. They had consumed and corrupted all that they touched, and their tyranny had grown so absolute that the very planet began to suffer. The cries of the oppressed, the blood of the innocent, the groaning of a wounded world, these things did not go unheard. The cosmic balance had been broken, and a terrible reckoning was stirring in the heavens. But the giants were not entirely blind to their fate. They too had access to forbidden knowledge, and in their dreams, they began to see visions of their own destruction. History is not a perfect record. It is a story with missing pages, torn by war, burned and conquered libraries, and buried by the sands of time. For millennia, entire worlds of knowledge have vanished, surviving only as whispers and legends. Scrolls crumble to dust, languages die, and great epics are forgotten. For nearly 2,000 years, the specific account of the giants, their fears, their final, desperate acts, was believed to be one such casualty of history, a story lost forever. But in 1947, in the desolate cliffs overlooking the Dead Sea, history itself held its breath. A young Bedouin shepherd, searching for a lost goat, tossed a stone into the dark mouth of a cave. He was answered not by silence, but by the distinct sound of shattering pottery. What he and his companions would uncover was not mere treasure, but something infinitely more valuable. The greatest manuscript discovery of the 20th century, hidden within clay jars, was an entire library from the ancient world. It's preserved for 2,000 years in the dry, still air of the Judean wilderness. These were the Dead Sea Scrolls, a library frozen in time, among hundreds of manuscripts. Scholars found something they had only ever read about in secondary sources, but the Book of Giants was not found whole. It was scattered, shattered into dozens of tiny, fragile fragments across several different caves. It was a colossal jigsaw puzzle written in ancient Aramaic. Scholars, acting as detectives of the distant past, began the painstaking work of reconstruction. They meticulously pieced together scraps of text, cross-referencing them with other fragmented versions later discovered, which were written in Greek and other languages, slowly reassembling a ghost. And as the puzzle took shape, something astonishing emerged. This was not just another story about the Nephilim written by their human adversaries. This was their own testament. For the first time, these mythological beings were not silent monsters of destruction. They had voices. They had names, like Ojaya, Haha, and Mawe. Through these fragile fragments, we hear their words, and more importantly, we feel their growing terror. The Book of Giants reveals their inner world. We learn of their apocalyptic nightmares, terrifying visions of destruction sent to them in their sleep. They dream of a great flood. They see a garden with every tree uprooted, and they watch in horror as a scribe washes a tablet clean until only 3 names remain, symbolizing the total annihilation of their kind. They are powerful, yes, but they are also doomed, and they know it. Desperate and afraid, they seek out the one man they believe can decipher their visions and intercede with the heavens on their behalf, the righteous scribe, Enoch. This revelation firmly places the Book of Giants where it belongs, as a lost, crucial chapter of the great Enochic saga. It doesn't replace the Book of Enoch. It expands its universe, running parallel to it and filling in the narrative blanks. It gives us the other side of the story, the perspective of the damned, who see the storm of judgment gathering on the horizon. But what exactly did they see in those terrifying visions? What secret of the coming cataclysm was so horrifying that it drove these mighty warriors to seek out a mortal man for a final, hopeless appeal? The answer is written in the visions themselves, a prophecy of cosmic judgment that would not only seal their doom, but change the face of the world forever, for all their monstrous power and dominion over the earth. A shadow began to fall upon the minds of the giants. It was a psychic sickness, a creeping dread that came not from any earthly foe, but from the disquiet of their own souls. Their sleep, once a respite of blissful ignorance, became a portal to terror. They were haunted by nightmares, fragmented visions of ruin, of broken thrones and silenced kingdoms. A plague of premonitions swept through their ranks, whispering of an end to their age of excess. Among them was a giant named Mawe, the son of the fallen angel Barakal, and it was Mawe who received the most lucid and terrifying vision of all. In his dream, he stood before a great body of water. He saw a scribe holding 2 stone tablets, reading from them the names of the giants, one by one. But as he read, the scribe would submerge the tablets in the water. Mawe watched in horror as the tablets and the names of his brethren carved upon them were dragged down into the black, in silent abyss. The dream then shifted. He saw a beautiful garden, filled with every kind of tree and plant, representing the world they had built. But then, the water rose. Without storm or sound, a relentless, silent tide swept over the garden, drowning every living thing until nothing remained but a still, dead sea. He awoke, the vision seared into his mind. This was no mere nightmare. This was a message. Terrified, the giants knew there was only one being who could decipher such a divine omen, the great-grandfather of Noah, Enoch, known in every ancient tradition as the scribe of righteousness. Enoch was the only mortal said to walk with God, a man who traveled between the earthly realm and the heavens. To find him was to undertake a perilous quest, for Enoch did not dwell among them. Mawe, chosen as their emissary, embarked on a desperate pilgrimage. He journeyed beyond the known world, crossing the deserts of great desolation and rising into the air like a whirlwind, searching for the one man who could read the will of the heavens. When he finally found the righteous scribe, towering giant humbled himself before the mortal man and recounted his terrible vision. Enoch listened, his face grim and still. When Mawe finished, the silence that followed was heavier than any mountain. And then Enoch delivered the interpretation. A truth so devastating it would shatter the foundations of the giant's world. The dream, he explained, was not a warning of what might happen. It was a verdict for what would happen. The tablets represented the giants themselves, and the water was their judgment. Their names, their legacies, and their entire existence were to be washed away, erased from the earth as if they had never been. The drowned garden was the world itself, and the silent tide was a celestial decree. A great flood was coming, a cataclysm designed by the Creator to purge the world of their corruption, to cleanse the earth of their violence and forbidden knowledge. The news fell upon the giants like the sky itself. For the first time, these titans who had shaken the very pillars of creation felt the cold, unyielding grip of true fear. Their hubris, their defiance, their belief in their own immortality, it all evaporated in the face of inevitable, divine judgment. They were not gods. They were a failed experiment, an abomination slated for extinction. The weight of this prophecy crushed them, their roars of conquest turning into cries of despair. But what happens when you tell a race of demigods that their annihilation is certain? Do they simply lie down and accept their fate? Or do they use the cosmic secrets taught to them by their angelic fathers to forge one last, desperate plan to cheat death and survive the end of the world? The end began not with a war, but with a whisper in the dark. It came first to the giant Ojah, son of the watcher Shemiza. In the depths of his sleep, a vision seized him, a nightmare painted on the back of his eyelids. He saw a great tablet, inscribed with the names of his brethren, submerged in water until every name, every legacy, was washed away into nothingness. Then the dream shifted. He stood in a cosmic garden before a tree of impossible size. Its roots plunged deep into the earth, and its branches clawed at the heavens. This was no ordinary tree. This was a symbol of their very existence. The roots were their fathers, the Watchers. The mighty trunk and its boughs were the giants themselves. And then the gardeners arrived. Angels, cloaked in divine fire, descended not to tend the garden, but to unmake it. With terrible strength, they tore the great tree from the ground, roots and all, and cast it into a searing flame. The primordial lineage of the giants was being utterly annihilated. Ojah awoke in a cold sweat, his heart a drum of thunder in his chest. But he was not alone in his terror. Across the world, his brother Maweh, son of the watcher Barakal, was jolted from a similar vision. One by one, the Nephilim woke from nightmares of judgment, of tablets being erased, of gardens being burned. The dreams were a plague, a psychic assault that their colossal strength could not fend off. For the first time since their birth, the giants knew fear. They gathered in a great assembly, their monstrous forms casting long shadows of doubt across the land. They shared their visions, the chilling similarities confirming their worst fears. A panic, cold and sharp, cut through their hubris. Some bellowed for defiance, for a final, cataclysmic war against the forces of heaven. But others, their voices, low and trembling, spoke of a different path. Was this a warning? Could they, the mighty sons of angels, repent for their sins? The debate raged, but it was hollow. As the accounts of their shared nightmare piled one upon the other, a dreadful certainty settled over them. This was not a warning to be heeded. It was a verdict being read. Their power, which could level mountains and drink rivers dry, was useless. The forbidden knowledge they had inherited, the secrets of sorcery and the cosmos, offered no escape. They were prisoners of an inexorable fate, sentenced by a power they had long ignored but could no longer deny. Their might had been rendered meaningless. Their reign was over. In their final, desperate hour, their arrogance shattered. They turned not to defiance, but to understanding. They needed to know the full extent of the decree against them. They resolved to send an emissary, a messenger, to traverse the known world and beyond. to find the one mortal who could interpret the will of heaven, Enoch, the scribe. The texts name the giant Maweh as this messenger who undertakes a perilous journey, transforming into the shape of an eagle to fly to the ends of the earth. He was tasked with a simple yet terrifying plea to have Enoch read the tablet of their fate and explain the dream that foretold their doom. It was the ultimate admission of defeat the titans of the earth, begging a mere mortal to explain their own destruction. But as Maweh soared through the heavens on his impossible quest, the true question remained: would the righteous Enoch offer a glimmer of hope, a path to mercy, or would he simply confirm the coming of the end? Enoch's message had been delivered. The petition of the giants, carried by the prophet to the highest heavens, was denied. But to truly understand this cosmic verdict, we must journey to the place where it was decreed. We must witness the convening of the heavenly council. Imagine a court beyond all mortal conception, a throne of celestial fire, from which flows rivers of flame, surrounded by the 10,000 times 10,000 who stand before the Lord of Spirits. It is here, before the Ancient of Days, that the case against the earth was presented. The great archangels Michael, protector of humanity; Raphael, the divine healer; Gabriel, the messenger of God; and Uriel, the light of heaven, looked down upon the mortal plane, and they wept. They saw a world drowning in its own blood, a creation groaning under the weight of the giant's tyranny. They heard the tormented souls of the dead crying out, their pleas rising like smoke from a world set ablaze by lawlessness. Their accusation ascended to the throne. The earth, emptied and desolate, cries out to the gates of heaven. The souls of men make their suit, saying, "Bring our cause before the Most High. You see what Azazel has done, who has taught all unrighteousness on earth and revealed the eternal secrets which were made in heaven. Shemi-Hazah, to whom you gave authority, has taught enchantments, and they have gone to the daughters of men and have defiled themselves and revealed to them every kind of sin. And the women have borne giants, and the whole earth has thereby been filled with blood and unrighteousness. How could a universe of perfect order tolerate such a monstrous wound?" The answer came as a voice of absolute authority, a decree that shook the foundations of creation. The Holy and Great One spoke. The judgment was not mercy, but fire and water. First, for the celestial traitors, the sentence was passed upon the watchers, the architects of this grand corruption. They were to be stripped of their glory, their heavenly station erased. They would be bound, hand and foot, and cast into the abyss, into the deepest and darkest places of the earth. The texts describe their sentence with chilling precision: to be bound for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth, a prison of total darkness until the final day of judgment. Then, the judgment for the world they had corrupted. A great deluge would be unleashed, a flood to wash away every trace of their sin, to purify the defiled continents. God would cleanse the earth of the Nephilim, wiping out the race of titans and all who followed their violent ways. It was a cosmic reset, a terrible and necessary act to preserve the seed of humanity and allow creation to begin anew. And so the celestial host moved to execute the sentence. The archangels descended like living stars. Raphael was commanded to bind Azazel, casting him into the jagged wilderness of Dudel, tiling sharp rocks upon him until he was buried in eternal night. Gabriel was sent to unleash the giants upon each other, to incite a war of mutual destruction among the titans. And Michael, the commander of the heavenly armies, was tasked with seizing Shemi-Hazah and his followers, binding them in their subterranean prisons for all ages. It was a war of gods and angels, fought in the final days of a doomed world, but the judgment held one final, terrifying twist. What of the giants themselves? When the floodwaters rose and their colossal bodies were destroyed, where would their spirits go? They were an unholy hybrid, born of a mortal spirit and mortal flesh. They belonged neither to heaven nor to humanity. Their fate was unique and uniquely horrible. Their spirits would not be allowed to ascend, nor would they be granted the peace of oblivion. Instead, they were condemned to wander the earth, disembodied, hungry, and malicious. They would become the evil spirits, the wandering demons of the world, afflicting and corrupting mankind until the very end of time. Think of it, the disembodied souls of these primeval titans, born of celestial sin and mortal flesh, now cursed to wander as a spiritual plague. The heavens had spoken. The earth would be washed clean. The watchers would be bound. But on the ground, their titanic children, the giants, were still masters of the world. What does a demigod do when it learns it has been condemned to oblivion by the very power that created its fathers? The verdict had been delivered, the judgment sealed, but these were not creatures of quiet acceptance. A storm of defiance brewed in their colossal hearts, a final, raging tempest against the dying of the light. Their roars of fury once again shook the foundations of the world, a challenge hurled at a silent, watching sky. They were the sons of gods, the titans of the earth. They would not be unmade. Yet, beneath the fury, a cold dread began to seep into the marrow of their gigantic bones. For the first time, these beings of absolute power felt the chilling touch of absolute powerlessness. Imagine, for a moment, possessing the strength to shatter mountains, only to discover that strength is useless against a prophecy. They could divert rivers, but not the river of fate. They could command armies, but not the legions of heaven. Their immense physicality, the very source of their dominion and their terror, had been rendered utterly meaningless. In their desperation, they turned their might towards escape. The texts speak of a frantic, tragic attempt to ascend, to claw their way back to the celestial realm of their fathers. The Qumran fragments explicitly describe the giant Oja declaring he would ascend to heaven to save himself, a testament to their final, desperate arrogance. They leaped from the highest peaks, their titanic bodies flailing against the indifferent air, only to come crashing back down to the earth they had so thoroughly corrupted. They screamed bargains at the heavens, offering promises they never intended to keep. Their pleas echoing unanswered in the desolate canyons. Nothing. The universe remained deaf to their cries. The arrogance that had defined their existence shattered into a million pieces. In its place grew a gallery of psychological horrors. There was regret, a sudden, piercing understanding of the cosmic harmony they had broken. There was anger, a white-hot, impotent rage at their watcher fathers for abandoning them to this fate. And most of all, there was fear, a primal, suffocating terror of the encroaching, endless darkness. A fear of non-existence that dwarfed even their own monstrous forms. They, who had been the apex of creation, were now nothing more than cornered animals, waiting for the slaughter. And then, the sky broke. It was not a rain they had ever known. It was the ocean of heaven, inverted, a solid wall of water that fell not in drops, but in torrents that could strip flesh from bone. The ground dissolved into a churning, brown chaos. Valleys became lakes, then inland seas, in a matter of hours. Their grand fortresses, built to withstand any earthly assault, were swept away like castles of sand. The tallest peaks became their last, desperate islands in a world reborn of water. Here, the last of the giants stood, their bodies lashed by winds and a deluge that felt like the wrath of creation itself. Their cries, once a sound of terror to mankind, were now a singular lament, a final, guttural roar of despair swallowed by the abyss. One by one, the Titans were plucked from their final footholds by the rising tide. Their immense bodies, which had once bestrode the world with such impunity, now sank into the crushing, silent dark. Their age of terror brought to a definitive, watery end. The giants were gone, erased from the face of the earth. Or were they? For what of their sires, the Watchers, who were bound in chains beneath the earth to witness this very destruction? And what of the forbidden knowledge they had unleashed upon humanity? Could a flood truly wash away an idea, a secret, or did their greatest legacy survive, hidden in the bloodlines of man himself? The waters fell. The great storm ceased. From the ark, a remnant of humanity stepped out onto a world washed clean, a world of silence. The age of Titans was over. The violence of the Gibberum had been purged by the deluge, and a covenant was sealed in the sky, a promise of a new beginning. But you cannot erase a memory so profound. You cannot drown an idea, though their colossal bones lay buried under mountains of silt. The story of the giants survived, carried in the minds of Noah's sons, whispered from one generation to the next. The tales of the Nephilim became the foundation for the myths of Titans, heroes and monsters in nearly every culture that followed. They were a scar on the memory of the world, a warning of what happens when the lines between heaven and earth are blurred. But if the flood was a total reset, a divine scouring of the earth, then how do we explain what came next? Because the giants returned. The scriptures speak of new Titans walking the earth long after the flood. The fearsome Rephaim, the towering sons of Enoch in the land of Canaan, and the most famous of them, all the Philistine champions, like Goliath of Gath. The Book of Numbers explicitly states the spies sent to scout the promised land saw the descendants of Enoch, who they claimed came from the Nephilim. Was this a second unrecorded rebellion of heavenly beings? Or did the corrupted bloodline somehow survive the flood, hidden within the very ark meant to save humanity? The greater threat, however, was not the one you could see. It was the legacy left by the spirits of the slain. The Book of Enoch is terrifyingly clear on this point. When the hybrid giants were killed, their immortal angelic spirits had nowhere to go. They were not human, so they could not enter the afterlife of men. They were not pure angel, so they could not return to the heavens. They were trapped, bound to the earth as disembodied, hungry ghosts. These, the text declares, are the origin of demons. Every act of inexplicable evil, every whisper of temptation, every shadow of spiritual oppression, these ancient authors traced it all back to the restless, malevolent souls of the dead Nephilim, forever seeking to corrupt the world that had rejected them. The flood, then, was not an end, but a transformation of the conflict. The war against flesh and blood became a war against principalities and powers. The Watchers had introduced a spiritual poison into creation, and the spirits of their children became its eternal carriers. The chaos, the violence, the forbidden knowledge, it didn't vanish beneath the waves. It simply became invisible, continuing its assault on humanity from a different realm. An unseen battlefield that exists within our world to this day. The physical giants were gone. Their spirits became the demons of the air. But what of the third part of their legacy, the most dangerous part of all? The forbidden knowledge, the secrets of the cosmos, of weapons, of sorcery, that the Watchers taught mankind. Did this arcane wisdom truly die with the old world? Or was it preserved, inscribed on stone or metal, and hidden away, waiting for a new civilization to unearth it, and perhaps repeat the same catastrophic mistake? The answer may lie not in what was destroyed by the flood, but in what was deliberately saved. The tale of the Watchers and their gargantuan offspring is not an isolated story, a relic of one culture's imagination. It is an echo, a theme that reverberates through the deepest corridors of human memory, across every continent and every age. The Book of Giants gives us one version of the story, written by the giants themselves. But the human race has been telling its own version for millennia. In the sun-drenched lands of ancient Greece, they were the Titans, divine beings of awesome power who warred with the Olympian gods for dominion over the cosmos itself. In the frost-bound realms of Scandinavia, they were the Jatan, primal beings of chaos and untamed nature, locked in an eternal struggle with the gods of Asgard. And far older, in Mesopotamia, were whispers of the Apkallu, 7 sages who brought civilization to humanity before a great flood. Their wisdom, a gift from the heavens that, in some tellings, carried a terrible price. From the red-haired, cannibalistic Sitaka of Paiute legend in North America, to the monstrous Fomorians of Irish myth, the pattern is undeniable. The names change, the details shift, but the core archetype remains: a race of beings, greater and more powerful than man, who existed in a primeval age, and whose conflict with a newer order of gods or heroes shaped the very world we know. Perhaps because these myths are a coded language for our most timeless anxieties. The giant is the overwhelming force of nature, the earthquake, the hurricane, the tsunami. They are the embodiment of the unknown, the monster lurking just beyond the firelight. But more than anything, they are a profound allegory for the destructive potential of power. The Watchers, the Titans, the Jatan, they all represent knowledge without wisdom, strength without restraint, and ambition without humility. Their story is a warning, etched into our collective consciousness, that absolute power corrupts absolutely. For thousands of years, our ancestors didn't see these as mere fables. They saw evidence all around them. What else could it be but the bone of a giant? And they looked upon the world's colossal structures, the impossible weight of the trilithon at Baalbek, the mind-bending precision of Puma Punquan. They asked a simple, logical question: how could ordinary humans have built this? For them, the only answer was a forgotten race of giants, whose strength was as legendary as their downfall. This idea, this memory of a lost age of titans, is not just a story. It is a fundamental part of the human experience, a ghost that haunts our oldest texts, our most sacred traditions, and our most epic poems. It suggests we all share a deep, ancestral memory of a time when we were not alone, a time when beings of immense power walked the earth, beings who were, in some stories, our teachers and founders, and in all of them, our destroyers. The stories are nearly identical. The fear they inspire is universal. Tatsist and legends can be dismissed. Colossal stones can, with great effort, be explained away. There is, however, one piece of evidence that is much harder to ignore. As the world spiraled into a chasm of violence and forbidden lore, as the earth itself groaned under the weight of the giant's corruption, a single, flickering flame of righteousness remained. Amidst the cosmic rebellion and the cacophony of a doomed creation, one man walked a different path. His name was Noah. He was a man described as perfect in his generations, a living echo of a time before the fall, a time before the Watchers descended and shattered the divine order, to be the last bastion of goodness in a world that celebrated wickedness. to hold fast to ancient laws while all around you, beings of immense power and intellect carved their own destinies with stolen heavenly fire. The world of the giants was one of monstrous ego, of power without wisdom, of knowledge without morality. Noah's world was one of quiet faith, of obedience to a higher power, and of a profound, unshakable trust in the unseen. This was the ultimate contrast, the roaring pride of the Nephilim versus the humble heart of a single family. And so, the command was given. Not a weapon of war, not a call to arms, but an instruction of preservation. Build an ark, a vessel of salvation, a floating sanctuary against the coming tide of judgment. It was an act of supreme faith, an architectural testament to a promise whispered on the wind. While the world mocked, a vessel was being built to carry the very seed of the future. The ark was more than wood and pitch, of course. It was a microcosm of creation itself, a meticulously curated library of life, carrying the divine blueprint for a new world, sealed against the encroaching chaos and the waters of oblivion. When the deluge finally came, cleansing the world of the giant's taint, the ark became an island of hope in an ocean of divine wrath. It was a fortress of life, Lawami on the waves that erased the colossal footprints of the Nephilim and washed away the blood-soaked altars. Inside this vessel, humanity was being given a second chance, protected from the storm it had helped to unleash. Then, silence. The waters receded. The ark came to rest, its doors opening not to the corrupted world of the past, but to a clean, empty earth, waiting to be reborn. And here, a covenant was forged, sacred promise from the Creator to the remnant of His creation. Never again would the world be scoured by water. And as a seal upon this vow, a sigil of divine grace was painted across the heavens. The rainbow. It was a bridge of light, a celestial reminder of mercy triumphing over judgment. A symbol that humanity's relationship with the divine had been reset. The lesson was etched into the very soul of the survivors. It was a story of cosmic consequences, a warning that moral decay invites its own destruction. But it was also a story of incredible hope, proving that even in the face of absolute corruption, faith and obedience could preserve the spark of life. The flood was not merely an end, it was a violent, necessary beginning, a baptism of the entire planet. Humanity was saved. The world was purified. The waters could wash away the flesh and bone of the giants, but what of their immortal spirits, born of both heaven and earth? The ark saved humanity and the animal kingdom from the physical destruction. The great flood washed the world clean. The giants, the monstrous progeny of heaven and earth, were wiped from existence, their bodies returning to the soil they once terrorized. Their fathers, the celestial watchers, were bound in chains of darkness, imprisoned in the heart of the earth to await a final, fiery judgment. Their kingdom of flesh had fallen. But an idea, once planted in the mind of humanity, is not so easily drowned. The legacy of the Watchers did not end in the abyss. It had only just begun to ripple through the currents of time, though texts like the Book of Giants and the Book of Enoch were ultimately cast out from the canonical scriptures of major world religions. Their shadow looms large. Early church fathers and Jewish sects held these texts in high regard, and their themes bled into the very fabric of theological thought. The intricate hierarchies of angels and demons, the concept of a multi-layered heaven, and the war for human souls. These ideas owe a profound debt to the Watcher narrative. They provided a vocabulary for the supernatural, a blueprint for the unseen war raging just beyond our perception. The story of the fallen ones became the foundation upon which much of Western demonology was built. it also offered a radical competing answer to one of humanity's oldest questions, the origin of evil. The familiar story places the blame on a single act of human disobedience in a garden, but the Watcher's tale paints a far grander and more terrifying picture. It speaks not of a human fall, but of a cosmic invasion. Evil was not born from a simple choice. It was a deliberate infection, package of forbidden knowledge and corrupting arts gifted to a naive humanity by rebellious celestial beings. Was the story of Adam and Eve a simplification, a more palatable fable to conceal a more disturbing truth about humanity's role as pawns in a cosmic conflict? This very idea of forbidden knowledge, gnosis, became a blazing torch for mystics and esoteric traditions for millennia. Groups like the Gnostics saw the material world as a prison, crafted by an inferior god. For them, salvation came not from faith, but from secret, divine knowledge. In the Watchers, they saw a powerful symbol, beings who broke the rules of a cosmic tyrant to bring enlightening, albeit dangerous, wisdom to mankind. This theme echoes through Hermeticism, alchemy, and the occult, a timeless quest to reclaim the stolen secrets of the universe, the very secrets for which the Watchers were condemned. From this wellspring of hidden wisdom flows the enduring allure of the secret society. Consider the legends of the Knights Templar, the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons, all built upon the premise of a guarded truth, an ancient knowledge passed down through an unbroken chain of initiates, hidden from the profane masses. The narrative of the Watchers is the ultimate prototype for this belief system, that there are profound truths about reality, technology, and divinity that have been deliberately suppressed, and that only a select few are worthy of receiving them. Even now, in our modern secular age, the Watchers have not been forgotten. Their story is a relentless echo, a mythic template that continues to shape our culture. We see them in our fantasy novels, our epic films, and our sprawling video games. Fallen angels, the bearers of forbidden lore, the ancient, powerful beings whose meddling in human affairs has earth-shattering consequences. They represent a timeless fascination with transgression, power, and the perilous price of knowledge. The stories, the philosophies, and the warnings have all survived. They form an immense, intellectual legacy that has shaped our understanding of good, evil, and the divine. But the Watchers and their giant sons left behind more than just ideas. They left behind a bloodline. And if these ancient texts are to be believed, the flood did not succeed in cleansing the world of their corruption entirely. In an age of genetic sequencing and quantum physics, the tales of primordial giants feel like echoes from a forgotten world. Our modern senses demand proof, data, and peer-reviewed evidence. And so, the saga of the Nephilim and their giant offspring is relegated to the realm of mytha, fascinating, but ultimately fanciful, story. Yet, the whispers persist. They linger in the digital shadows of the internet, in fringe archaeological reports, and in the sheer, undeniable scale of ancient megalithic structures. Faded, turn-of-the-century photographs surface. ALLEGEDLY, showing the skeletons of 9-foot men unearthed from forgotten mounds. Reports from South America to the Middle East speak of anomalous remains, quickly suppressed or dismissed as hoaxes. And we must ask, are they all deceptions? Or are they inconvenient fragments of a history we are not meant to see? When we stand before the colossal stone blocks of Baalbek in Lebanon, or the impossibly precise walls of Sacsayhuaman in Peru, structures modern engineers would struggle to replicate the official explanation that they were built with simple tools and manpower begins to feel incomplete. The stones themselves seem to cry out for a different story. Of course, science offers rational explanations. The discovery of massive fossilized bones belonging to dinosaurs or extinct megafauna, like the mammoth, could have easily been misinterpreted by ancient peoples as the remains of giant humanoids. The Greeks themselves believed the bones of titans were scattered across their lands. Furthermore, the very real medical condition of gigantism, a pituitary gland disorder causing extreme growth, provides a biological basis for these legends. Throughout history, individuals of extraordinary height would have been born, their presence easily magnified by storytellers into a race of titans. A single 7.5-foot man could, through generations of retold stories, become a 15-foot tall monster who could move mountains. These explanations are logical. They are neat. They fit perfectly within our scientific understanding of the world. But do they truly satisfy? Why, even when presented with these rationales, does the specter of the giant refuse to fade? Perhaps it is because the story resonates with a primordial truth buried deep within our collective psyche, the idea that we were not the first, that we are the inheritors of a world once walked by beings of immense power and tragic hubris. The narrative of the giant is the ultimate story of ambition, rebellion, and the catastrophic price of forbidden knowledge. This is where the rediscovered Book of Giants becomes profoundly important in our modern age. It is more than just another myth to be explained away. It is a first-hand account, a psychological blueprint of a civilization wrestling with its own cosmic significance. The text doesn't just say there were giants. It gives them names. It gives them fears, dreams, and a desperate plan for survival. It transforms them from lumbering brutes of folklore into complex, intelligent beings who communed with fallen angels and learned the secrets of the cosmos. It forces us to confront an unnerving possibility. That myth is not just a failed attempt at science, but a different way of encoding profound truths about who we are, where we came from, and the powers that shape our universe. The scientific age offers plausible origins for the myth of giants, but it cannot explain the intricate, specific, and forbidden knowledge detailed within the text of the giants, a knowledge of the heavens, of weaponry, and of the earth's secrets that seems far too advanced for its time. So if the giants were merely a metaphor, born from dinosaur bones and genetic anomalies, then where did their sophisticated, celestial knowledge truly come from? The cataclysm of the flood, the demise of the Nephilim. It is easy to view this as the end of the story, a final, definitive judgment upon a corrupt age. But to do so is to miss the terrifying truth. The tale of the giants was never an isolated event. It was not a beginning, nor was it an end. It was a single, brutal campaign in a war that has raged since before time. A war for the very soul of reality. This is the unseen conflict, the cosmic struggle that underpins all of myth, all of religion, and all of history. A battle fought not with swords and stone, but with influence, knowledge, and spirit. On one side, the forces of divine order and creation. On the other, the shadow of rebellion, chaos, and corruption. And Earth, this fledgling world teeming with a new and wondrous creation called humanity, became the chosen battlefield. Why here? Why us? Because humanity was the ultimate prize. Forged in a divine image, we held a potential that threatened the rebellious powers. To corrupt humanity was to deface the masterwork of creation itself. The descent of the Watchers was a strategic invasion. The forbidden knowledge they offered was not a gift, but a weapon of ideological warfare. The giants they sired were not just an abomination of flesh, but a spiritual occupation force, designed to dominate the physical world and enslave the human spirit. The ancient texts are explicit about what happened after the flood destroyed the bodies of the giants. Their physical forms were annihilated, but their spirits, malevolent, disembodied, and born of an unholy union, were condemned to roam the earth, to bring trouble and affliction upon humankind until the final judgment. The war didn't end. It simply changed. It moved from the visible realm to the invisible. It became a war of whispers, of temptations, of ideologies, a spiritual battle for the hearts and minds of every person born since. Consider the enduring struggles of our own world, the pull between compassion and cruelty, between wisdom and destructive ambition, between creation and annihilation. The ancient narrative of the giants provides a stunningly profound framework for this eternal conflict. It suggests that these are not merely human failings, but echoes of an ancient war still being waged in the spiritual dimension. The legacy of the Watchers is not found in crumbling ruins, but in the seductive allure of power without wisdom, knowledge without morality, and ambition without accountability. The spirits of the giants live on in the violence, oppression, and insatiable hunger that still plague our world. To understand the Book of Giants is to be given a key way to perceive the unseen architecture of our reality. It is a call to awareness, a plea to recognize that the great dramas of human history are often reflections of a deeper spiritual conflict. The battles we fight within ourselves and the wars we wage against each other may be the modern-day expressions of this ancient cosmic struggle. The story is not over. The ink is not yet dry. The echoes of that first rebellion and the heroic resistance against it still reverberate through time, shaping our present and defining our future. The great war for the soul of humanity continues, and every human life is a front line. The final chapter of this cosmic conflict has yet to be written, leaving us with the most unsettling question of all. What role will we play in its conclusion? The Book of Giants is but one fragment of a lost history. What other warnings lie buried in time? Now, it is your turn to seek them out. Question the stories you've been told. Unearth the truths that have been forgotten, and decide for yourself what legends are real.